broadband plan. So I thought this was a nice illustration. For these reasons, the administration has targeted Recovery Act dollars toward investment in broadband to spur both infrastructure deployment as well as programs that encourage adoption. NTIA, not too long ago, I can't remember now, the snowstorm has completely messed up my time frame, I have to say. We just issued our Digital Nation report, which was based on a survey that the Census Department conducted of 54,000 households, about 129,000 people, on broadband adoption. And I think that report really underscores the importance of the National Broadband Plan as well as our programs. That report in brief noted that while virtually all demographic groups have experienced a rise in broadband internet access adoption at home since 2007, we still have historic disparities among demographic groups overall, and it is those disparities that focus us on why it's so important to get these programs out there. So NTIA and the Rural Utility Service have these grant programs, and Rural Utilities has loan programs as well to address some of these disparities. NTIA has $4.7 billion for grants. At least $200 million of that goes to public computing centers. At least $250 million goes to sustainable broadband adoption projects. And the bulk of the rest is for infrastructure. We also have up to $350 million for broadband mapping and planning grants to the states, which I'll discuss later. So we are coordinating closely with the Rural Utility Service to make these programs accessible to the public, and also to avoid duplication, to leverage our resources and each of our agencies' areas of expertise. I kind of like the term sweet spot. Our first funding round, I know a lot of people know this, was highly competitive. The two agencies got about 2,200 applications. And so far, NTIA has awarded over 30 grants totaling over $625 million. I can't give you exact numbers because as we speak, there's more press releases going out and the numbers keep ticking up. And we're going to continue to issue these grants on a rolling basis. As Lisa mentioned, we have also announced our rules for round 2. And as she also mentioned, based on our experiences in the first round and based on stakeholder feedback, we have modified the rules in the second round to make the process more user-friendly for the applicants, but also to try to get the biggest bang out of the Recovery Act buck. One of the key refinements is our focus on comprehensive community infrastructure grants. And that is what Lisa calls our sweet spot. What this means is middle mile projects that connect anchor institutions such as schools, libraries, hospitals, and public safety agencies. This can maximize the investment impact, reach new users, and improve quality of life, and encourage broadband adoption in both urban and rural areas. So, for example, healthcare providers can monitor patient health remotely, consult with medical professionals, and do all the neat things that telemedicine is going to give us. Universities can stream audio and video content from other institutions. We can have better smart grid. And connecting anchor institutions also can help spur broadband adoption. Workers at these anchor institutions can experience the benefits of broadband on the job, and students can use broadband at schools and libraries. It can improve digital literacy, increase broadband demand at home, and attract last-mile providers to the area. These projects, which would use open networks, can ultimately make last-mile connections to consumers and businesses more affordable. Now, in the mapping area, our state broadband data and development grant program is a matching grant program that implements both the purposes of the Recovery Act as well as the Broadband Data Improvement Act. So far, we've awarded 52 out of 56 grants. which will assist the states and their designees in gathering and verifying state-specific data on the availability, speed, location, and technology type of broadband services. This data, as I said, is going to be used to develop publicly available statewide broadband maps and inform the comprehensive, interactive, and searchable national broadband map that we are required by the Recovery Act to create and make publicly available by next February. All of this data will further our goal of having more data-driven decision-making. So just to close, there's a lot of other ways that NTIA is involved in terms of broadband, not the least of which is with regard to spectrum, identifying spectrum for possible commercial uses, providing data through our services, and providing the administration's positions before the FCC. But I will wrap by just saying that with regard to our broadband grants, I like to quote Angie Simpson, who's a senior advisor in our front office. She likes to say that the applicant's ultimate challenge is to bring us good projects. Now, our challenge is to fund those good projects by September 30th of this year. Meeting those challenges, however, will go far in helping us meet the country's broadband challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. So we started with 3 A's of access, availability, and affordability. We've heard a lot about availability adoption from RUS and NTIA. Now we're going to move to 2 C's, which are consumers and competition. And that'll finish it up.
So, is this working? Somewhat? Anyway, because my voice doesn't carry that far, does it?
Can you hear him in the back? More or less.
Me too, and I feel like I'm in a press conference.
Stereo.
Actually, I have a special problem with my name. Pretty much everybody is named Rob Davis. They call my name and 4 people raise their hands. Thanks for inviting me. One of the benefits for me of this has been I've found out what the word conspectus means. I looked that up, and as I understand, it means summary. So I've learned something already, and I'm doing very well. Yeah. Well, as described in our, by the way, I work for the chairman, but I'm speaking only for myself. I'm not speaking for any of the commissioners or anybody else. I'm really hardly even speaking for myself here.
Can I speak for me?
I'll speak for Lisa. Speaking for Lisa. Lisa spoke well for herself. She doesn't need me. As described in our comments, and we filed comments for the National Broadband Plan to the FCC. Competition and consumer protection are great ways to increase broadband adoption and deployment, and to ensure the highest value of the internet to American consumers. Now, the FTC is sort of a little bit the odd man out. We're an enforcement agency. We're very small. There's 1,000 employees altogether. That includes everybody from people who work in consumer protection, people who work in competition, the economists, everybody. And we have a very broad subject matter jurisdiction. We cover the entire economy pretty much with specific cutouts, some of which are important here, one of which is common carriers. We're not allowed to go after common carriers for anything, and banking as well, as another example. We don't have any big grant programs. I think the grant programs that you guys have described dwarf our budget by many, many, many times. But we have 2 sort of main rules under Section 5 of the FTC Act, and that's really our sort of organic core enforcement authority. The first is unfair methods of competition, and I'm an antitrust lawyer, and that's what I do mostly. And then the second is unfair and deceptive acts or practices, which is probably what most of you know us for. So we do not call rule, which is the thing that, if somebody asks me what I do and I don't know whether they're going to like me or not, I say, FTC, we do the do not call rule, which is generally okay with me. That's until they get to the end of it. So for consumer protection, really the basic point, and we made this comment in our comments to the FCC, is the more comfortable consumers are online, the more they'll use it, the more they'll use the internet. If consumers are afraid of identity theft or loss of privacy, then they're going to be less likely to want to use the internet. And this is borne out by statistics, which is sort of unusual for me. Usually things I say are actually contradicted by statistics, and I think the statistics are probably created by some of you here. But the first is the Pew Center study. Broadband adoption went from 3% in 2000 to over 60%, at least as of last spring. But then there's sort of the remaining 37%, which is very important for the broadband plan. Blair Levin from the FCC spoke I think it was about a month ago, to EPIC, the Electronic Privacy and Information Center. And he said that nearly 60% of the people who haven't adopted broadband think that it's too easy for personal information to be stolen online. And even those who do have broadband were concerned about that. 40% of those who are online worry about that. These people aren't too far off. I mean, the internet can be a dangerous place. Just a couple of days ago, the FTC sent letters to 100 companies telling them that personal information, including sensitive data about consumers and their employees potentially, was shared from their computer networks and was available on peer-to-peer networks, and was available for people who were on peer-to-peer networks who could use them for any purpose they wanted, including identity theft or fraud. These are their customers and their employees. When you go to our website, there's a press release on that, and there's draft letters that we sent to these companies, although we're not telling you who the companies are. This implicates data security issues, obviously, and it implicates privacy issues. Now, as I said, I'm not a consumer protection lawyer, and I get very nervous when I start talking about consumer protection, and actually a lot of other people get nervous when I talk about consumer protection as well. But I do understand that disclosure issues are a really important part of this debate, important about the net neutrality debate that was discussed at lunch, and important about for the broadband plan. And it's the same issue that I was talking about before. If consumers aren't confident that they know what they're getting, then they're going to be hesitant to get broadband. And it seems clear that broadband providers should truthfully disclose important information about the services that consumers are about to buy. The question is what is that information? What do they have to? What should they disclose? Well, there's some possible disclosure issues. Our Bureau of Economics director, Joe Farrell, he used to be at the FCC. Everybody knows him. He's a great guy, incredibly smart. He's smarter asleep than I am awake. He gave me a candidate. He calls it net non-neutrality disclosures, which that's a Farrellism. It may be a pun. It may be really funny, but I'll figure that out in a couple of weeks. I'll think about it, and then I'll find out what was really.
Sleep on it.
Yeah. I don't know that's going to help me. So that's our providers cutting deals with content or application providers. Are they going to discriminate against other competing firms in favor of these companies that they're cutting these deals with? Another disclosure might be how fast is broadband. That's obviously a rat's nest. There's a lot of difficulties in terms of what has to be disclosed, what's actually going to help consumers if they hear it. And what are the network management policies that the providers would have, particularly policies with regard to bandwidth cutoffs when there's congestion. So we've worked in this area a little bit. I mean, we had a case with Sprint in 2007. We closed it in the summer of 2007. In that case, Sprint actually had a deal on their webpage talking about BlackBerries, where consumers or subscribers would get 3 megabytes of email usage and unlimited web usage. And the Java application that was on all these cell phones for a while that everybody would accidentally hit, and it would just be horrible. Well, actually, okay, that was my experience. It wasn't with Sprint. They had a flat monthly fee for 3 megabytes of email and the Java and unlimited web usage. That's what they advertised on their website. It turned out actually that 3 megabyte limits applied to everything, including web usage. So if you went over by doing web usage, you were going to get charged, even though this was unlimited. It turned out that this wasn't really an intentional plan to screw consumers. Actually, the website, as I understand it, was the only place where this was actually this promise actually was made. And Sprint moved very quickly to fix the problem. They changed the website. They provided redress to any consumers who were overcharged, and we closed the investigation without doing any more in the summer of 2007. And now, as a competition lawyer, I get to talk about competition. Some disclosure issues actually have competitive implications. To the extent that providers are puffing about some aspect of their service, consumers may stop paying attention to those claims. And that actually could be important if what they're puffing about is something that's really important to consumers. I'll just use broadband speed claims, for example. If consumers aren't paying attention to broadband speed claims, because the broadband speed claims are so unreliable, then why should anybody bother to advertise their speeds? Well, if you're advertising, you're not able to advertise your speeds. It's not really as much of a competitive advantage. It is an advantage still. If you have a customer and you're really fast, you're more likely to keep your customer. But you're no longer as likely to advertise these speed increases. And as a result, there's a lowered incentive to actually invest in increasing your speed. Now, like I said, I don't want to overstate this. It's not necessarily going to be the case that if consumers don't focus on broadband speed claims, that broadband providers won't invest in faster speeds. I think they probably still will, but it is an issue. And of course, how information is disclosed is critical. The FTC has spent a lot of time on that question in a range of contexts. And some of the same issues seem to arise in the context of mortgage disclosures and privacy statements. It just is that more information isn't better. You provide a lot of information and consumers end up glossing over the whole thing. We've all experienced privacy policies that we see online that come up and we can't read them. So they're not really providing much information for consumers. By the way, we're having a workshop on March 17th on cloud computing and internet privacy. I suspect some of you may have something to read on that day. I think, but if you're bored, you could come by. It's going to be at the FTC. And there's some details on the website now, the FTC website now, and more will come up. And if things go according to the way they have gone, within 2 weeks before the workshop, we'll get a fuller agenda and discussion on what the cloud computing and internet privacy workshop is going to be about. We've had a series of them, and this will be, I think, either the third or the fourth on that issue. On the competition side, we've done less work in broadband area. And we did a workshop in 2007 on net neutrality. This is when, remember back to 2007, actually to some extent the lunch debate was a little bit of a flashback to 2007. You had sort of traveling bands of dog and pony shows where one person yells at another person about net neutrality, and it's always very interesting, and I'm sure it was interesting today. Yesterday, I don't know if any of you were at ITIF yesterday. The idea of the panel at ITIF yesterday was how everybody's starting to come to an agreement on net neutrality, but mostly what happened was the guy from Verizon and the guy from Google just followed each other. So I'm sure some people were reassured by that. I don't know. Our report, the 2007 report, is still on our website. It's a little dated in some areas. It relied on some assumptions about entry and other things that maybe didn't come out to be true, although may turn out to be true in the future. But it's still very good in general topics, and it's a lot of good information. The whole workshop, actually, the whole net neutrality workshop, the webcast for it is still on, so you can watch. That was actually, in 2007, was the previous Snowmageddon. The workshop actually was cut off in half because people couldn't actually get to the workshop. And people don't remember these Snowmageddon of 2007.
I don't know, I moved here from here, I still don't get it. But
right.
It snows, so what, But they have snow plows.
Once you mention snow on the radio, people start swerving in anticipation. Well, competition policy, and I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly. Competition policy in general can be very important in showing growth in broadband. and ensuring the growth of applications and content of the internet. There's really no better way of matching up what we can make as a society with what we want to consume as a society than competition. There are a number of issues in this area, and a number of them can be thought about as antitrust problems, but antitrust may not be the best way to deal with a lot of these problems, and these are problems that are often considered to be net neutrality issues. But as my boss says, it's a good way to think about some of these issues, but maybe not a good way to do something about them. Antitrust may be too slow and too uncertain to deal with some of these problems. That's what I think. Again, this is what I think. I've emphasized that, right? A broadband provider, for example, may have an incentive to block or degrade services provided over the internet if those services compete with services they provide. That's one possible competitive issue. For example, an ISP with monopoly power could have an incentive to do this if it helps discriminate between consumers. But on the other hand, and this is why antitrust is such a problem here, it's also true that a broadband provider that's doing this is degrading its own service. And presumably consumers are paying for this service. A provider is not going to want to degrade a service that it's providing. So there are incentives both ways. It's just not very easy to do. Another issue relates to the issue of two-sided markets. That's a term that merger lawyers started using. Actually, it's two-sided platform is the phrase. But a newspaper is an example of a two-sided market. Alfred Kahn gave this example during the broadband workshop that we had in 2007. You could actually see Alfred Kahn doing it if you go to our website. So, for example, a newspaper will charge you to buy the paper, and they'll charge advertisers to appear in the paper. In a sense, a newspaper is charging sort of both sides to meet in the middle. These type of markets are usually very efficient. You see higher prices to the less sensitive people and lower prices to the more sensitive people. For example, you pay much less for the paper because the paper wants to increase the circulation so they can try to get more advertisers and charge more for advertisers. And so, the price that you pay for paper is lower than it would otherwise be. If this applied to broadband, you would see the ISP charging content and application providers to reach you, and potentially charging you less for broadband. That's a possibility. You could be charged less for broadband, and you would be made up by charging the Washington Post or somebody else. So that could be good for consumers. It could be, in fact, good for broadband penetration. But there are issues there as well. Charges to content and application providers could actually reduce their incentives to innovate and to create content. And that's the thing that pulls people onto the internet in the first place. Also, some content and application providers might actually start charging prices. A lot of this stuff is free now. They might actually start charging prices. Again, that's the thing that gets people onto the internet. And then there's a Joe Farrell point, which I swear I understand when he makes it to me. I swear, but if I try to explain it to you, I would just bollocks it up completely. So I'll let you go on that. Finally, there's a terminating access monopoly problem that I'm actually raising only so Sharon will cut me off and make me stop talking. So I'm done.
Why don't we save terminating access monopoly for the questions?
Okay.
I'd love to ask you about that.
Right.
Okay. I'd like to say anything about the bureau that I had at the FCC, but the Wireline Competition Bureau is, we are the bureau on an ethicality proceeding, so I didn't realize you were going to speak about that today, but that's great. So why not continue the lunch discussion? Second is that we have a big piece of the implementation of the National Broadband Plan because the Universal Service Fund and inter-carrier compensation and all those things that involve to our bureau, and those are big pieces of the plan. I would also just tell you that when I first started the FCC, people would say, wireline competition, what does that mean? And I'd say, wireline, like landlines. And they'd look at me like, why are those relevant? So finally I figured out what I should say instead is, all those funny fees on your phone bill? That's my bureau. And then just like he said, depending on if you want that, how you're trying to judge whether they're going to like you or not, you know, I would say, oh, well, you know, those universal service fees, they go to, you know, helping schools and libraries. So, okay, I'm happy to pay them. You know?
I don't think that works as well as mine.
But it all depends, right? In any case, we're kind of the money bureau when it comes to these you know, carrier issues and who pays who, so that tends to get people's attention quite a bit. So. Anyhow, I don't know if there's any musicians out there. We're now moving to the A major chord because we've gone from A to C and now we're going to go to E for education. Either that or we're acing the panel, I'm not sure. Sorry. Quasi, would you please tell us about education enrollment?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I want to thank certainly Catholic University and all the folks involved in setting up this event. Certainly want to thank my colleagues from the FCC and NTIA, FCC, and the FCC as well. I know that everyone involved in scheduling this has been working pretty hard for this, and I know you guys are all probably fairly tired here, so appreciate the last win from the last Mohicans here still with us. It certainly is always a lot of challenge with the government schedules, getting everybody involved, so we appreciate the expletive staying out of the email trail. Last thing we need is another FOIA request on any of our records here, so thank you all for your patience on that. But on why we're here, so the National Broadband Plan is one of the more integral parts to the education agenda for the department. The President absolutely wants the United States to be a leader in education again, period. And I think in order to support that plan, we have to get on track, and that track necessarily includes the resources in place to get the most innovative practices into instruction. So we need to transform the education by getting the best ideas from our best teachers. We have to capture the imagination of our digital natives, and we need to harness the power of technology to lead America again in the 21st century. While there are myriad of entry points, which I think can be supportive of this objective and this goal, I'll try to keep this brief and talk about 3 areas of particular interest, and talk about, you know, hopefully we can open up a conversation later on during the course of the afternoon. We have to revisit the way we define access, certainly for instruction in many of our rural and urban core communities. Secondly, we'll need school systems that are going to bring their local policies into line with 21st century standards for technology use. And we'll need human capital strategies that leverage the power of the internet to get the best teachers to the most vulnerable regions. These are just a few of the ways I think we're thinking about helping schools to get on board once the information highway is finally completed for our school systems. So to those points. First, with respect to the communities as access points, I'm from North Carolina, and North Carolina, like all states in this country, has a rural component. It's a little bigger than some parts, but it's a little smaller than other parts. But all to say, the rural districts, I think, in this area share the same challenges with access to connectivity. And in a recent visit down there to some of our rural schools, we observed some things that are quite problematic, because some of you may or may not know, the region that's serviced by a lot of rural school districts is a fairly wide area. Rural students don't tend to live in critical populations like they do in an urban environment, and that sparse locality drives some really interesting challenges with regard to transportation. So it's not uncommon to find people traveling an hour and a half or more to get to school. And when you double this, it's not all that unrealistic to conceive in an environment where close to 4 hours or more is spent being unproductive. Now, if I get ESPN and Facebook on a plane traveling 700 miles an hour, there's little or no reason why these kids can't be studying, getting downloads of National Geographic, or working on Discovery Channel, or getting mentoring help from any of their buddies, or yes, even doing their homework on the bus as they're traveling back and forth to school, or listening to science mentors. So that's a problem, I guess, with regards to some of the access to infrastructure, and certainly the technology is capable of providing them the wherewithal to do so. We can talk about that as well. Secondly, I think in addition to this lack of student productivity and engagement, we have well-documented dearth of talent in our rural and urban core communities. So short of Carl Layman or any other Nobel Prize laureates descending upon these areas and matriculating to these schools to teach topics in some of these most desperately needed competitive areas, we're going to really think about what ways can we actually get the type of talent to these areas to get the education that we need to be competitive moving forward here. And I think it really talks about thinking about ways where online learning can be of assistance. Learning to look at real options here that can accelerate learning where it's appropriate, students getting access to virtual schools in some places, complementing what they're doing in class with instruction, and sometimes supplementing what they can get from after-school help. And we'll absolutely need the help. Certainly the plumbing is important. We're talking about the broadband plan here. But we'll need the LEAs, the local education agencies, as well as state education agencies, to work with us on preparing our kids. We can certainly provide some assistance on SIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act. So we can provide some guidance there. We can talk about providing clearinghouses for online approaches to learning, be advocates for more choice, which in many instances may include virtual school options. In kind, we're going to need the states to examine their thinking on teaching certifications, for example, so that qualified teachers in Ohio can teach kids in North Carolina without some of the hoops they have to live through right now. And we'll need instructional technology leaders to work with the information technology leaders, which sometimes, far too often, actually doesn't happen in many of our school areas. And then lastly, I think there needs to be an acknowledgement that we need to have better use of technology by teachers. Excellent teachers who may have little to no skill in technology are going to be hard-pressed to provide value in a very instrumented world. And similarly, technology-savvy instructors who have minimal, who are struggling with instruction are going to be minimal value as well. So both sides of the coin need to be addressed. So we're going to need professional development and education through technology. It's going to be more important than ever. And that professional development has to be done right the first time. It has to be done at scale. It has to be effective. And we have to make sure that we're doing it, doing it with the best of our student outcomes in mind. So we'll need teachers, we'll need mentors, we'll need coaches, and we'll need to support those teams. And we have to find how we can actually do that in the most effective and efficient fashion. And that's going to begin in some places in our teacher colleges. So that it can't just be operational excellence of throwing a PowerPoint up on a slide or looking at how do I do attendance with my Excel sheets, but thinking about how to deliver education through technology as a vehicle for doing so. We're going to need to go to some of the schools that are really good at producing online instruction. Teaching through an online vehicle is not the same as standing in front of a child or a student and educating that populace. So we're going to need to find where the best schools are and encourage pipelines of talent to continue to flow and stream into our school districts. Secondly, we're going to need professional development in transition and into school as we go through the onboarding process, as teachers become acclimated and acculturated what's important in the school districts. They're going to need the technology options that are most effective in those districts, as well as in higher education. And lastly, we're going to need a lifelong support for technology in their professional communities so they can continue to support, cultivate, and hone their craft as instructors. So I think we're sensitive that this is a journey, and I hope that today's the beginning of a larger conversation for some of the more innovative approaches that the states and the districts can bring into play. The policy barriers that can be lifted, the alignment with human capital strategies, and I'm looking forward to this dialogue. I'm excited about our work with all respective agencies here on the plan. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Klaus. Do we have questions from the audience? Start.
David Irwin from the Communications Law Institute. My question is to Kwase and to Rob. Insofar as your independent agencies, well, I guess yours is an executive agency, but your agencies now have responsibilities in the broadband environment. Have your budgets been increased? Do you have more dollars, more people to try and make the Recovery Act play out well?
We don't have specific additional responsibilities. What we do is complementary to what's going on. So I think probably most of the answer goes there. I think we're like I said, we're very small. We're about half the size we were before Richard Nixon was president, and we do have a lot more authority in a lot of other areas, particularly the consumer protection side. And there's like 100 million people floating around this country, but no, I don't think that's as I understand it. And like I said, on the competition side, there hasn't been as much done. I don't know if we've gotten additional.
Well, I'll speak directly and say that while I'm probably not going to be at liberty to discuss our budget, what I will say is that one of the things that we consistently are looking at are cross-cutting solutions for systematic approaches to education. That's just a sort of fancy way of saying that we're going to expect for our applicants, for our constituents to bring in approaches to education that change the way education is delivered. Those solutions may include technology as cross-cutting measures, and we're hoping that they do so. So we're not categorically expecting line items that are dedicated to what sort of things are you going to do now that you have broadband in place, but we're really very much focused on what the outcomes are going to be for our students. If those happen to leverage some of the best available options to get us back in a competitive position by leveraging the power of the technology on the internet, then by all means go do so. So you're not going to see anything just dedicated to that type of a conversation, but the budget certainly we've got from the stimulus dollars, I think are going to be, very much, I think, supportive of those ambitions and agendas, and we're expecting some really competitive, really innovative things coming from our applicants as well as from our state education and our local education agencies as they bring forward their thinking on how they can change education.
And I should also say, I don't know what's going for us in the future budgets. I know a little bit more about past budgets, so I wasn't referring to future.
Although we don't know, of course, all that's going to be in the plan. No, I'm sure you have a group. Beyond that, though, when this thing crash lands on March 17th, what preparations ahead of time, if any, do your organizations have to make? And what physically happens, would you think, in carrying out this plan at the Commission, of course, and in the other related parts of the government?
Why don't I start that one off? The plan has in it, so first of all, the plan is, those of you familiar with the commission practice, it's 3 weeks, I think yesterday, to the date that the plan is due, and 3 weeks is typically the amount of time that things circulate with commissioners, so you can imagine that somebody said we're still developing. But it will be very soon, and we will see a very large document on March the 17th, if not before. The plan has a number of recommendations in it, and they take a number of different forms. But some of them say the FCC should. In others, there are things, there are policies that the FCC has control over. Some of them are not, and some of them are, other agencies have different pieces of responsibility. I'm not part of those discussions in terms of conversations people have been having with other agencies, but different sections. Should the education section should be always in there some. It has pieces for us, pieces for the rest of the administration, pieces for Congress. And there's also, there's pieces that all of us can do as individuals. So hang in there. Do any of you want to speak to your roles in developing?
I really haven't had any formal role in development of this plan, and I don't know what the plan says, of course, because I don't work at the FCC, the independent agency. I work for the executive branch. That being said, the FCC has been really great at reaching out to people and discussing with different people and different agencies what their thoughts are and what direction they might want to go in, and would that be a positive thing or a negative thing. So there's been a really good job done by the FCC to reach out to people who have expertise in different areas in the communications community. As well as that, the White House has been very good in having a meeting on a very regular basis with a whole group, a whole cast of characters of people who are interested in broadband stimulus, the broadband plan, and it's basically an opportunity to update where things are. I mean, my role in those meetings has often been, well, this is where we are in NOFA, and this is where we are in the process of getting out awards, and this is where we are in such and such a process. So there's been a really good effort at trying to make sure that connections are made and that everyone knows that there are lots of moving pieces and we're not going to get hit in the head with them once they come out.
Yeah, I mentioned this previously. Actually, let me start by apologizing to Rob. I don't know where I got it in my head that you're with energy, but
He's a very high energy.
I can still use my.
I use energy.
I had this whole, I was in love with this view of being between energy and education. However, I think the FTC is a very good example of. I think the FTC is a very good example of how citizens can access government services via broadband. So I'm still going to use my description, nonetheless.
What we'll call civic engagement, that's another.
Civic engagement, very important, yes. So I apologize. And to make matters worse, I called them part of the executive branch. And
We're independent.
I mean, as I mentioned, NTIA has filed on behalf of the administration comments to the broadband plan, but I also agree with what Lisa says. We have worked closely with providing information to the FCC. We are very much looking forward to seeing the plan and acting on it as appropriate. And from what we've heard so far, there will be plenty of roles for NTIA and other government agencies in implementation of the plan.
I'll briefly say that I think that one of the things it's nice to have is a tech-friendly executive in the White House. It's also nice to have a tech-friendly secretary in charge of education. So what that means for us is that we're going to have a receptive audience to the policies that we've been pushing for. From an ed tech standpoint, the advocacy certainly is there, and I think the leadership is in place to be supportive of those things. I think there are a myriad of things that I continue to hear from our constituents that they would like to do. And I think having the infrastructure in place to do some of those things, meet together, I think you're actually going to see really a confluence here of a lot of really great ideas, finally have an opportunity and a groundwork to actually push forward. So I don't think you're going to see radically different things from us. I think you're going to see really, hopefully, a floodgate of people rushing to the opportunity to present what they've been looking for probably for quite some period of time here.
More questions?
Evan Morris with Harris Corporation. This question is for Anna. I discussed a little bit about the broadband mapping program, which is part of the Recovery Act, and how it can't be a searchable database. I was wondering if you could delve into a little bit more as in regards to, is it going to be one national database, you're going to combine all the different state maps, or is it going to be something that's going to be searched by individual states? And then moving forward, once that is complete, what are NTIA's plans to work with the FCC to continue to update the maps and potentially highlight different focus areas such as education or telemedicine for some non-consumer, direct consumer connection?
Yeah, the goal with the grants is to provide statewide grants, but eventually to have a nationwide map. Now, as to the mechanics of whether it means a bunch of mini maps versus one big map, I have no idea. I'm sure that's something that the technical people are figuring out. But yeah, the Act does require NTIA to make sure that the map continues to be updated, and so we will continue our relationship with the FCC to ensure that that happens.
And I should just add to that the sharing goes both ways also, in that one of the requirements of the Mapping Act, the Data Improvement Act, right, is that the data that the FCC collects on subscribers to broadband, not data about the subscribers, but data on the numbers of subscribers to broadband, be shared with the mapping entities in each state and in aggregate form. And we have developed a policy to do that, which is currently circulating before the commissioners. So before too long, we should be able to release that data to the eligible entities in each state, which I think will be very helpful. More questions? Okay, well, join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you, Sharon, Gillette, and to all the panelists. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here to speak with us. If you could all just give us a few more minutes, we're going to have some thank yous and then some closing remarks for you all. I hope that you found all of today's panels informative and engaging, and we express our deepest gratitude to all of the fantastic panelists and moderators who shared their insights and their expertise. I'd also like to thank our gracious host, Riley Ryan, and our sponsors, ComDaily, Google, Nokia, Patton Boggs, Lambert, O'Connor, and Johnston, Greg Halgen, and Wilkinson, Barker, Nauer. Also, thank you to the faculty and staff at the Catholic University Columbus School of Law, particularly everyone in the Student Life Office, Dean Miles, Professor Donna Gregg, and Professor David Irwin, the director of the Institute for Communications Law Studies, who all helped bring this program together. And to the students in the Institute and on the Comlaw Conspectus Journal, who volunteered throughout the process to help put the entire symposium together. Finally, I'd like to thank my co-chair, Kevin Ryan, for all of his hard work, and to the FCBA for supporting this program in so many ways. And here to give a few closing remarks is Bob Pettit, partner at Wiley Ryan and the president of FCBA.
I will not prolong the afternoon by repeating all those thank yous, but on behalf of the association, I'll thank the same people, and I think you will all agree this has been a very timely and informative program. And speaking of which, I did want to, before we get out of here, just let you know about two programs that we have upcoming. As the National Broadband Plan is unveiled and folks begin to actually see it and discuss it, we are, of course, we are planning programs in response to that. Let me mention just a couple. First, immediately after the release of the broadband plan, we're going to have a luncheon with, in fact, featuring FCC Chief of Staff Eddie Lazarus, who was a keynote this morning, as the speaker, and that's scheduled for the Mayflower Hotel on March 18th, starting about noon. So you all want to come to that. And also on March 22nd, in conjunction with the CTIA convention in Las Vegas, the association's wireless committee is planning a CLE, and as part of that will be a discussion of industry reaction to the National Broadband Plan. And again, it's March 22nd, shortly after the plan comes out. That's going to start at noon in the Las Vegas Convention Center for those of you who are planning to be there. So mark your calendars for these events and the other events that we have coming up regarding broadband. And thanks again to everybody for coming. Thanks.